How much does a professional in that situation deserve to be paid? Is it £17 an hour? Is £17 an hour enough? UK doctor strikes are back. Everyone's frustrated. I left the NHS, burnt out, disillusioned, and just over being broke. But didn't they just get a pay rise last year? Those greedy bastards. Or is there something deeper going on? Alright, I'm talking about the UK doctor strikes today because, that's going on. And obviously it's not the main thing I usually talk about on this channel. I try not to get involved in any politics, but this is a topic which is very close to home for me. So I thought I would discuss it in this video and try and address some of the misperceptions that especially are driven by the mainstream media around junior doctors and how greedy they are. Hello, if you're new here, my name is Chris. I'm a medical doctor. I'm a former NHS worker and I currently live and work as a doctor in Australia. I left the NHS in 2020 after working for about 2.5 years in the system. To be honest, I hated pretty much every moment I was there. I think at the time I didn't really know what it was. I thought maybe I had mental health issues like depression or something, but I think looking back, I was probably just suffering from severe burnout. I often think it's very hard for people who don't work in the medical space, or even people who do work in the medical space but aren't doctors, to really grasp how hard the life of a junior doctor actually is. And I really wish more people could just be a fly in the wall in the day of a life of a junior doctor, or as they like to call them, resident doctors in the UK now. I remember when I was in F2, so my second year out of medical school, I was on a general medical rotation where, yes, we were doing the ward during the week, often staying a lot longer than we were scheduled to, so often 1 to 2 hours every single day of the week. And then we'd have weekend on calls, working 12 to 14 hours on a Saturday and a Sunday. Those weekend shifts were particularly bad. And the way it would work is that it'd be fully staffed during the week, and then out of hours, it'd be kind of just skeleton staff. Really the bare minimum that the trust could afford to provide. And those night shifts that we do over the weekend, which were 12 to 14 hours, would involve one registrar. So that's a doctor with a little bit more experience, maybe 4 to 5 years out of medical school, and 2 F2 doctors. So that was me and then another F2. So they're second year out of medical school. And then there was an advanced nurse practitioner. So four-person team, and we would cover 400 patients. And these weren't patients with a runny nose and sore throat. These were 400 sick medical inpatients. And you're given a workload which is not actually humanly possible to complete. How does that make you feel as a person? It basically makes you feel like you're not good enough, like you're not smart enough, you're not working hard enough. And in addition to that, you're just given so much responsibility and there's just so much weight on your shoulders. I remember during one of these night shifts I'm talking about, the registrar and I had to decide to palliate a patient overnight. Something that really should have been done by the day team, but there was a bit of miscommunication. So here I am as a 24-year-old F2 having a family meeting with a patient's family who's dying. And this is someone who's their dad, their brother, their granddad. And I'm doing this completely on my own because my registrar is too busy managing 3 resusces of critically unwell patients. How much does a professional in that situation deserve to be paid? Is it £17 an hour? Is £17 an hour enough to deal with situations which no one else really has to deal with? And some people may have a rebuttal to that. Well, you knew what you were signing up for. Yes, I get that. I chose this career, albeit when I was 16 years old watching Scrubs on E4. But I also didn't choose to be emotionally shattered on a 14-hour shift looking after 400 patients. I didn't choose a system that gives you more responsibility than support. Doctors and anyone who works for the NHS, they sign up to serve. They don't sign up to be exploited. And knowing it would be hard when I signed up also doesn't mean accepting broken systems forever. And I remember I actually thought that it was medicine that I didn't like. And when I left the UK, I felt like it was doctoring that I was leaving. I was leaving the medical profession behind. But when I started working here, I realized it wasn't the job that I didn't like, it was just the system that I didn't like. And yes, Australia isn't perfect, but it is a hell of a lot better here. I am living and working in Australia and I'm a lot happier than I used to be, but I still deeply care about the UK system. Most of my family and friends all still live in the UK, and I'm praying there's going to be some decent doctors that stay there to look after them. So why are doctors striking again? And in fact, 90% of doctors who voted in the ballot, 90% have said yes to strike action, which will be taking place on the 25th of July if everything goes ahead. So let's maybe chuck in some numbers so you can get an idea of what's going on. In 2022, 2023, the average base salary for an F1 was about £14 an hour, which is what I was on when I was working there. After the strikes in 2023, that base salary went up to £17.56 per hour. The government had proposed to go in line with inflation next year. It goes up to £18.62. But the BMA, the British Medical Association's goal is for it to be £22.67 for an F1 doctor. So that's a doctor straight out of medical school. And there's this very misleading narrative in the media, which is that doctors are being greedy, that they already had a 22% pay rise and now they want a 29% pay rise. Even the term pay rise is misleading in itself, and they're preferring to call it pay restoration. So this is what people often get wrong. Let's just run an example. So in 2008, let's say a junior doctor earns £30,000 per year. It's 2025, 17 years have passed. Over those 17 years, the cost of living or inflation has gone up massively. So just to pay for housing, to pay for food, to pay for fuel. But instead of their salary rising with inflation, it's just kind of stagnated. And in some years, the wages didn't move at all. What does that mean? If their pay had kept up with inflation, junior doctors who were on £30,000 in 2008 should be on around £40,000 in 2025, but they're not. They're actually way, way below that. So in real world terms, they've lost thousands of pounds per year. And the BMA estimates that they've lost about a quarter of their pay since 2008 when you adjust for inflation like this. So when you hear doctors talking about pay restoration, they're just asking to be back where they should have been in 2008 if inflation hadn't eroded their wages over time. Imagine if every year your landlord raised your rent, but your boss only gave you a 1% increase in your pay. That's basically been the vibe since 2008. So it's not about greed, it's about undoing 16 years of slow pay cuts. And another thing to bear in mind is that this is just the base rate. This is not taking into account the multiple hours that doctors do in overtime. When I was working in NHS, there'll be most days of the week where I'd stay 1 to 2 hours after the time I was getting paid. And the government seemed pretty happy that they're offering this £18 an hour for foundation year doctors. Apparently £18 an hour is generous for someone making life or death decisions on 3 hours sleep and a Tesco sandwich. And let's not forget that during this time period, tuition fees actually tripled in 2012. So they were previously £3,000 per year, and now they're at £9,000 per year. So that means if you're doing a 5 to 6 year medical degree, that will easily cost you more than £50,000 just for tuition fees alone. That doesn't include any living expenses or anything. So people are starting work with this huge debt that will take years to pay off on a salary that is just not sustainable to live in 2025. So what's the bigger picture here? So this isn't just about money. It's about morale, burnout, and retention. Morale has collapsed, not just because of pay, but because of how doctors are treated, how they're talked about. There's a lack of public and political support. Half the time it feels like the media are blaming doctors for everything, and the staffing is just unsafe. People working beyond exhaustion, and yet you're still expected to smile and stay late for free. I remember back when I was working in the NHS, there was a nurse who I was working alongside who was a nurse practitioner in hepatology, and he told me something that I keep thinking about to this day, which is the NHS runs on goodwill. I couldn't agree with that statement more, because so many people give way more to the NHS than they ever get back in return. But you can't build a healthcare system on vibes alone. And a lot of people will be saying very fairly that patients will suffer. And the truth is, no one wants patients to suffer. That's the whole reason we got into this thing in the first place, hopefully. But when the system is already stretched to breaking point, quietly carrying on doesn't help. It just hides the cracks. Striking is painful, but so is burnout. And strikes are a last resort to protect both patients and doctors in the long term. And yeah, people say, well, if you don't like it, just leave. And that's exactly what's happening. I'm literally filming this from sunny Australia as we speak. And more doctors are leaving, or just quietly checking out, or just burning out in silence. I left, and I don't regret it, but I do wish that it didn't have to be that way. Because leaving doesn't fix the system, it just empties it. And no, I didn't just move to Australia for the weather, the money, and the girls, but I won't lie, that definitely helped. And finally, there's no money. Where's it all gonna come from? Burnout, staff shortages, and overseas recruitment all cost more in the long term. Prevention is cheaper than collapse, and collapse is where we're heading if we don't start listening.